So, what we want to encourage and invite you all to do today is cultivate authentic relationships. So, as Janine and I mentioned, please go ahead and put your name and how to reach you in the chat. We want this to be a conversation. We want this to be a networking event. We encourage you to act with courage, put yourself out there, dedicate yourself to your path, be a lifetime learner. If you're here with us today, you're already clearly on that journey. And really, really importantly, let's celebrate each other. Let's be in support and celebrate each other along the way.
Mm-hmm. There we go. I'm playing with the screen share. Here, let's try this again.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, good. All right. So today's unboxing growth is launch strategies during turbulent times. And Janine and I invite you to not only listen but also really participate along the way. So please, any questions that you have or comments, throw them in the chat. Also, we will have time for interaction throughout the presentation. So we really want this to be engaging and a conversation, and not just us talking, and really get your participation. So join us along this journey.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're here because you know that we're headed into turbulent times. So we're all going to discuss what we're anticipating, how to address it, and it'll be a good discussion based on things that we probably have all learned along the way.
Yeah. So we are Outfront Solutions, Janine Moss and Nicole DeMeo here, and we have formed this marketing consultancy to serve communities for marketing, communications, business development, and branding. That construct that you see there is our Ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese term that means reason for being. And it really sums up all that we do at our firm and how we serve different communities of people like all of you, visionaries, entrepreneurs. We work with venture fund, and private equity fund managers, really to focus on increasing your visibility, growth, revenue, and valuation. So we're always thinking about that along the way. One of the things I want to point out is that the center of this Ikigai is results and purpose. So we're always focused on really making sure that we're aligned with our purpose. And we encourage you all to do that as well. And results come with that, right? So, yeah.
And as we go forward, I think you're going to see how purpose is one of the things that can see you through the turbulent times.
Yeah, very much so. And those were our LinkedIn addresses. So please absolutely connect with us, and let's continue to engage in the conversation. Also, if you ever want to book time with us, you can do so on our website. The domain is there. It's outfront.solutions, no.com. We have a fancy URL. All right. Thanks, Janine.
Okay, so one of the things that we've learned through our long careers is that we can't, things are going to happen, and this isn't going to be the last time, and the pandemic won't be the last time. We can't control these things that are happening, but there's a ton we can do in how we adapt to them and how we react to them, right? And a lot of that has to do with knowing ourselves, knowing our business, and understanding our customers. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. Interestingly, just today, WPP's Global Chief Client Officer, Lindsay Pattison, put out something on this very topic. So we thought we'd grab her quote because it's exactly what we were going to talk about as well. So I think we're all aligned in our thinking going forward, which is that if you really have to focus on having a very strong value proposition, right? And if you think about it, they're 100% more recommended with the value when you have a strong value prop, because people can express it. So one of the things to look for your value prop is making sure that it's something that any individual or your target markets are able to carry forward and tell other people about. And that will ensure that it's a strong one. So what's going to happen is that consumer behavior changes. Now, it doesn't just happen, obviously, during crisis, but it will happen rapidly and sometimes take some turns, as it did during the pandemic. And when that happens, it's time for you as business owners to create some new strategies. So just as some examples of that, I know there used to be the Great Recession before this other recession. And during there came out that whole point of view that women will always buy a lipstick even during recession. That's true for everybody, not just women. Not that that women buy a lipstick, but we all look for little treats, male or female or whatever. You're gonna look for little things to make yourself feel better, right, along the way. And the other thing I think is really interesting is from stuff to experiences. Now, that was already happening. Certainly the millennial generation has been focused on experiences rather than stuff. But since the pandemic, so has everyone else. A lot of us downsized. I know that I barely own anything anymore. I've got a couple of houses, but anything that's in them, there's not that much. It's really about my experience of having the best life I can have. And that's all I'm really interested in now. And other people are like that too. It's all about the experiences that we can have along the way. And another example is learning to cook again, right? So if you would have, because we stayed home, we learned how to cook. And all of these things, the reason they're there is that they point to opportunities for you. And they point to things that you can think about. What am I doing? What can I offer that's just a little something extra and better? What's something how do I add experiences onto my offering? And what are people doing that I can intersect with my company? So the new requiring new strategies, the communicating of the why, that is your purpose. And that's proven to be strong with employees, with customers, literally with everyone, especially today in our era of transparency, being clear about why you do what you do, your origin story, what you're passionate about. That's very translatable and relatable and must be focused on in difficult times.
And if I may add,
oh, yes.
A lot of times the why is the only thing people really remember. Right? So they will take in your why. But a lot of times it's the only thing that they remember about you. So making that really clear, and as Janine mentioned, telling your origin story is really important and valuable, especially during crisis times when emotions are raw.
And your why should always be your North Star, right? No matter what you do, whether it's hiring a new product, whatever. But during difficult times, ever more important to really zero in on it and make it the focus of your communications. As Nicole said, it's what people will remember and carry forward. So providing value beyond what you normally do, this was another thing. We have to go above and beyond to capture attention and to draw people to us. So we talked about experiences, personalizing things, being really clear about who your customer is and speaking to them in a personalized way, providing new services, adding new value, and we'll talk about that. So this is kind of trying to think about what are the new consumer behavior changes and what can I do that strategically that will meet those needs. But what Nicole and I learned, and particularly we've known this. I'm not the greatest in emotional intelligence. I wasn't raised by an emotionally intelligent family, but about 20 years ago, I realized how important it was, and it became a focus. I listen, I learn, I'm constantly improving, and over the pandemic, I can't tell you, my knowledge and my interest and my belief in emotional intelligence ratcheted way up. because it's all about how we're all feeling. So we wanted to kick off today, emotional intelligence is when you are sensitive to both your own and the people around you, how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and what's affecting them. So we thought it would be nice to start off this presentation by asking you that. And you feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, but we'd love to know.
Put it in the chat.
How are you feeling today? How's your emotional state today? And feel free to speak it too, because that's also kind of fun.
So the underlying emotion for me is joy, just to be here and be in a learning mode, with a high degree of curiosity. And I've already, and to be assertively vulnerable to share what I think. So on the last slide, you had stuff to experience. And I want to share that what I'm interested in is not information, but experience. Right? And so for me, as I'm going through and hearing your theory, I would love to have the experience of a company that you've seen that does what you're talking about, because then I can actually integrate it. Right? So I got all the theory part. Right?
Well,
so what's
good news?
Yeah.
We do have some case studies that we will speak of, but I think that's a really great question. How is it that emotional intelligence has been applied, right, to launches, to being in market?
Yeah. And applied some of these techniques. So we'll talk about those too. So thank you, Dan. Fantastic. Anyone else?
And also feel free to put it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I am feeling raw today, a little raw. Sometimes I'm just like, okay, what's coming next? So, I feel a little raw. And so that's my truth.
Yeah. I think I'm feeling excited, to meet all of you. I'm excited to learn what you're going to be interested in. And I'm also kind of, when we put together this presentation, I was really happy thinking about this and relating it to the people that we're working with. We're working with a ton of emotionally intelligent people now, and we're even working with an AI technology that applies emotional intelligence to interactions. And for me, coming from that background I mentioned, I want to learn everything I can about it, and I want to learn everything I can about my emotional state and how it colors things, and understand much more about how it affects people. So this is my sweet spot for learning.
Great.
Anybody else want to share anything before we move on?
I feel
yes, go ahead, Peggy.
I feel positive and productive. And I especially like to see your phase about learning to cook again, since I sell kitchenware. That's a big bonus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy, well, you must have done well in the pandemic then, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we grew a lot.
That's
right.
Great.
And so now behaviors are going to change again, but will that behavior change? That's one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves. Will it? I'm going to say no, because with recession and pressure on finances and the inflation in food prices and the expense of going out to eat still being very high, I think we're going to continue to eat at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And with food prices going up, my product hasn't gone up that much, so it looks more economical.
Yeah, so there's that too. Anybody else want to share?
It just feels like we're very tunnel visioned here about, what's going to happen to our business. We got to remember that most billionaires were made in a recession or a depression. The Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts. And right now you can put a dime in the stock market and get $1. So I think we have to look at our financial picture much more holistically than we may be talking about here. I'll give you an example of and that's why I believe in multiple streams of income. When the pandemic hit, I may have lost 31 speaking engagements in one day, but I have Airbnb vacation rentals, and I did not have one night open in a year. So I think we all need to be more diversified in
Yeah.
how we look at our income. But recessions, to me, are an opportunity. I feel sad about it because a lot of people don't prepare for it. But if you do, you'll never make more money in your life.
Yes. Beautiful, Edie. That's, yeah, absolutely. And we'll have a few examples of that.
Yeah.
But those are great points.
Right. And it is important to know that there is all this opportunity. That's why we want to say change in the consumer behavior is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a really great thing for you. And the question is, how do you find that great thing with the behavior change, right? And Airbnbs did great because nobody wanted to go, people wanted to sequester, right?
Great.
And they can't afford a house.
That too. And any other thoughts before we move on? Okay, well, thank you for letting us know what's on your mind and how you're feeling approaching this section. The real moral of the emotional intelligence story is that you have to always put people first as you move into a new time. And I'm calling it a new time, but it might not be a new time. But and maybe every time's a new time, and you always have to be looking at how people are changing and what they're doing and how you're relevant to them. But if you start by putting people first, you will always be at the beginning of that wave. And what we do is when we approach any assignment, Nicole and I, we look at the entire ecosystem of a business or our client's business or our business, right? And during the pandemic, we created this slide because a lot of people were just saying, well, I just got to, communicate with my customers. And we would say, no, there's a whole ecosystem that's depending on you and that's part of you that you need to think about what they're going through. When you're thinking about people and putting people first, think about each element of your ecosystem and how you relate. So we spent a lot of time, for example, in the early part of the recession, people were like, oh my gosh, what do I do with my employees? How do I tell them what's going on? I'm going to have to do layoffs. How am I going to figure this out? How do I keep the wheels on my bus while this goes on, right? And so we did a lot of work on that. Other people came to us and they said, like the world's largest pajama company came to us and they said, we're not going to, our whole supply chain is disrupted because people aren't buying at retail and everything's piling up in the warehouse and we're going to have to cancel orders. How are we going to deal with our supply chain? These manufacturers are critical to our success. We need to keep them, but at the same time, we're not going to be able to pay them the same. We're not going to be able to order the same. So we developed a bunch of communications about that. And I can tell you that it was a lot about shared strategies, shared solution creating, So that's a couple of examples. Nicole, do you want to say anything else about thinking about your ecosystem?
No, I might just I might just do that when we get to the case studies a little bit more so, but I will absolutely reflect on this. And, just really tapping into the trends as we outlined before, the emotional intelligence and what's going on for your markets. It's really, really important. Yeah.
If you may remember, there was a lot of tone deaf things that happened in the beginning of the pandemic where people were rah, 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 but people weren't feeling rah, rah, rah. So people actually got angry with those kinds of communications. And that's why emotional intelligence is so important and to take the time to think about it before you move out on communications. So let's talk about Outfront Solutions because we launched in April of 2020. Right in the middle of the very beginning of the recession. And I know Nicole wants to tell you where she was and what she was doing because she was the linchpin of Outfront Solutions.
Well, Janine and I have had the good fortune, and a lot of you have heard me say this before, of working together for over 20 years, on and off, but mainly on. And we were both working on different projects just before the pandemic hit in 2020. And I was actually in Cuba as part of a women's delegate for How Women Lead. So that organization that you all know I'm a part of as well. And we both are to a very large extent. In fact, this week we've had Get On Board Week to help women get on boards. But we were in Cuba and the pandemic was coming in, and there was no way around the fact that it was going to be global, right? And I'm sitting there in Cuba and I'm thinking about Janine and our skill sets and the fact that we have crisis communications skills. We've worked on the September 11th Fund. We've worked on hurricane relief efforts. We've worked on a lot of M&A. And with mergers and acquisitions, they're a lot like a crisis every time. And so with all this experience, we just felt called to serve and just step forward. And so I reached out to Janine and I said, come on, let's get the band back together again, because it's time to step forward. People don't know what to say and how to say it. Everybody just felt absolutely paralyzed in their lives. And so as marketing and communications professionals, we thought it was really important to step forward and serve. So we got on 2 to 4 webinars a week. We were out there just donating our time, helping people with how and when and where they might communicate. And it was through that, intention and stepping forward to serve that our business really grew. And then it evolved into our clients saying, you know what, we have to redefine who we are. We have to reinvent ourselves. And so our clients ended up going through, and to this day, a lot of a journey of brand positioning and messaging, redefining how you show up, what you say and where you say it. We've been doing go-to-market strategies. So this was just all in reaction to what was going on with the pandemic. And as much as crisis communications has been a baseline and an offering for us, most people don't really want to talk about crisis, right? They just want to talk about growth and valuation and all these things. And so we quickly morphed and made sure that we were communicating all the services that we did provide around growth and valuation. But we did take a bit of, I would say, an emotionally intelligent journey, right? With coming out in a way to serve and bring people along in a time that was completely unprecedented, because we not only had the pandemic, we had the Black Lives Matter movement and the financial crisis. Yeah.
So I just want to add that when Nicole called, I had been working with an accessories company and we had been producing products in China. Well, guess what? We couldn't get those products anymore, right? So I had been, in the days before Nicole called, I was going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to change? I'm at a dead stop with my products. Where am I going next? Then she calls and she says, my God, we have so much experience in crisis, we need to share it. And I thought, oh, yeah, crisis experience. So sometimes you forget about really critical. I've spent many years in crisis communications. And yet when this happened, until Nicole called, I hadn't put 2 and 2 together there, that this would be a service, something that I should bring forward. So I think that's another thing to think about as you observe how consumer behaviors are changing is what basics, what skills, what knowledge do you have that you can then employ in this new environment? And something else I also want to observe, because we were doing all these webinars and we were doing all this pro bono stuff, 10 of our past clients noticed. And suddenly we're getting calls from our past clients who we hadn't worked with for 10 years. And now we work with a lot of our past clients. So It was really an interesting thing that happened there in providing service. Our intention was to provide the service, to tap into skills we had that we could offer. The unintended experience was that we got a lot of promotion, a lot of visibility, and now, business is really booming for us. So let's talk about one of our first clients. So one of our first clients was a company called The Good Stuff. And The Good Stuff was selling cannabis beverages, right, prior to the pandemic. But also what notably happened was that, and you may remember, is that certain companies were and products were declared essential, right? And alcohol was, and so was cannabis. So all of a sudden, rather than being restricted from sales, their sales were going to be expanded, but they needed to decide. They hadn't evolved their products. They needed to evolve their products. They knew that they weren't serving it as well as they could. So they came to us and they said, hey, can you help us right now figure out what products we should be getting onto the shelves quickly? And so we have a lot of experience in new product development as well. So typically in new product development, you take all of your ideas, you hone them, you engage consumers with them, you learn about the hard and soft values that they provide. You test everything because it's so expensive to launch a new product, and then you try to get it out on the shelves. Well, how are we going to do that during the pandemic? Everybody's home. It's not like we can have a focus group and 12 of us are going to sit in a room together. So what we did is we got creative about it. We first of all, it was like, where are the cannabis consumers and how are we going to find them? Well, luckily we had friends and we had been in the cannabis industry ourselves. So we had a pretty extensive list of consumers. So what we did was we said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a survey. Let's find out where people are, how they're feeling, how they're approaching their lives in this new environment. And we'll try to understand who our customers are. So we did that and we got a really great response. You may also remember we were spending a lot of time in front of our computers at that time. So we were lucky in that people wanted to engage in this medium since they weren't engaging in other ones. So that we got a great response to the survey. And we were able to create customer groups. And at the end of the survey, we said, would you be willing to participate in a Zoom focus group? And a whole bunch of them said, yes, we would, because also we gave them free product. And we did some other benefits, obviously, as you do for focus groups. So what we did was, we believe that if you ask questions correctly and you listen really well, that your market will tell you what they need. There are certain things you can ask them, like how much will you pay for this bottle of cannabis? And they're going to say like $1. Right? So you can't do certain things, but there's many, many things you can do to understand the things that you need to know as a business. So what we did was, but the challenge in Zoom, remember the early days, now we're like all experts, but in the early days, we didn't know how to create a relationship on Zoom. And focus groups require a certain amount of relationship. People have to feel safe enough to tell you what they really think, right? That immediately, you have to have some level of trust for that. And they have to feel validated. There's a bunch of things they have to feel in order for you to get to the real key information you need. So what we did is we mounted these Zoom focus groups. But what we did, because we couldn't be there and show them product and have them taste it, we created really like a magazine ad for every single product. So it's like form factor was it in a tub? Was it in a bottle? Was it in a tall bottle, a skinny bottle, whatever it was? What was on the label? What was the promise? What was the flavor? What was the use case? Because we had a theory that the flavor and the form would be affected by the use case, right? So we made these ads, we depicted the use cases, and we convened these Zoom calls with focus group participants. And we had a really wonderful person working with us who was very good and very relatable. And she was able to really draw them out. And we were able to create groups of these consumers, whether they were medical consumers, recreational consumers, whether they were, and what level. And we were able to show them the products and get the most amazing information from them. So responding to the behavior change that everybody was staying home, responding to the fact that the government had made this an essential product, responding to the environment that we were operating in which we needed to learn, we were able to come out with a great plan for new beverages, which is immediately went into a whole bunch of other iterations and packaging and things like that and got launched. So that, Nicole, would you like to add anything about good stuff?
Just in general about, product testing, user testing, visitor testing, audience testing. It's always good to do that. It is always good to find time and check in and listen. Are my services resonating? Is there something else that I could be providing to you right now that would be even more beneficial to you in your life or your trajectory of your day? So we keep finding ourselves working with clients from, a real estate client to a personal branding client. What is it that, we can learn by truly listening? And so we encourage you to always be a listening leader, a listening company, and do this kind of testing, if you will. It just always provides really good results, and it can give you that insight into how it is that maybe you need to pivot your business, and what have you.
There has never been a time when we did any kind of user, consumer, visitor, person testing that we didn't learn stuff that we didn't know that was incredibly valuable to launching our product.
Yeah. And that can be a campaign in and of itself as well. We listened, and here's what we're delivering. And people always like to be heard and seen, right?
And just to build on that just 1 second, and that's to say that Nicole and I come out of a long line of using public relations and media relations as a tactic. So you absolutely can use your market research as a tactic for further communications and releasing the results of your studies and using it in your sales materials and putting it on your website. There's tremendous additional value besides honing your product and marketing. This is a great story. Nicole has to tell you what happened with How Women Invest.
Yes. So I was in Cuba with that group of women that I was mentioning before. And 2 of them were the general partners, GPs of the How Women Invest Fund. And I have been on the advisory board of How Women Invest. And so we're down in Cuba, and we were super excited because we were coming back to the United States, and we are going to hit the ground running and go and plunk ourselves down in front of a lot of women to invest in a new venture capital fund that we were forming called How Women Invest. And the value proposition was to invest in female-founded and female-led companies. Not just one person on the executive team that's female. No, these are companies where the founders and 50% or more ownership are female, and also the leaders of the organization are female. We're actually the only venture capital firm in the United States that's doing that right now. So we were all excited to hit the ground running when we got back from Cuba to raise that money, and bam, the pandemic hits and we can't go anywhere. And none of us had raised a full venture capital fund like this in the past. And so we just thought, oh no, this is not going to work. I have to sit in front of people to ask them to invest in a fund. there's a lot of education that needs to happen because our focus is to get women to own their wealth. We want women investing no matter where it is. Doesn't have to be in how women invest, just putting your money to work, because women are notoriously not doing so as much as men, right? And so we were so nervous, and I have really good news. It ended up that we pivoted and decided, instead of sitting down in front of one-on-one people and going about it that way, let's set up calls. Let's set up informative educational calls. Here's this fund. Here's how venture capital funds work. Here's what it means to invest in a venture capital fund. That's being an LP or limited partner when you invest in a venture capital fund. And the whole idea was to make this accessible and educational. And so we did all these calls, and bam, all the women just started to jump in, and we had a first close. So what that means is when you raise over half of the fund, you can actually announce it. The SEC says, go ahead, communicate it to the rest of the world. So we announced it, and this was in record speed. And we announced the venture capital fund, and that we had already gotten to a first close, and it was during the pandemic. And Janine and I, we got, coverage in Forbes and Crunchbase and VentureBeat and just the top media outlets telling this story. Even, I wrote an article on my why. And that was really important to get out there, and that ran in Crunchbase. And even because of the article, we had people calling us every day saying, hey, how can I invest in this fund? And so we ended up raising the fund in record time, in just 6 months, and closed it by December 2020, and got investing in companies throughout 2020 even. So once you raise, half of your fund, you can invest in them. And we've already had 2 exits. So 2 of the firms who we've invested in have already had favorable exits. And to this day, we do LP, limited partners, those who have invested in the venture capital fund. We do LP calls, and we give them updates. And we let them know who we've invested in and what the trajectory of the company is, and have these amazing entrepreneurs speak and also ask for what they need. And so it's just been an incredible experience that we turned into one of, oh God, how are we going to do this? I have to go and sit in front of people to ask them for money. And how inefficient is that? Like, we actually couldn't have educated as many people. So that is a true pandemic, and even during a recession, people were thinking, or hard economic times, not recession, what is it that I really want to meaningfully do with my money? So yeah, really, really great outcome from that.
And I just would say about that, one of the things I think that was so appealing in that is that it was exciting, and it was forward thinking, and it brought joy and meaning to a future state, which all of us needed and wanted, right? So I think that was part of the success of what you did there. We're going to go quickly because we want to get into some Q&A, but one of the questions we get asked often is, well, can I still sell stuff? And I'm sure the answer is probably we don't have a choice. We have to still sell stuff. We've got mortgages and we have people to support. So, but the key is, there is resilience. Of course, you're going to have to cut costs. You will. But as long as you find the nugget with this changing consumer behavior and find your role in it, you will be weathering the storm. Just want to go quickly. Nicole, anything to say about this other than that?
It's just that, selling, absolutely, yes, we need to do it. Emotional intelligence, bring that to the table, right? A friend of ours and partner, Tony Lamb, he has a whole bunch of businesses, and one of them is Wingstop. He owns like 4 Wingstop franchises. At the beginning of the pandemic, he said, I'm going to keep selling and thoughtfully. And he put ads out on Facebook, and, and it actually made people come to his stores, and he was very transparent and emotionally intelligent around the trauma and fears around safety. So he communicated what he was doing from a safety perspective right in his Facebook ads, and he sold, but he sold in an emotionally intelligent way.
Yeah. And yeah, we're never stopping selling. That's, I think, the moral of that. And marketing, people tend to just want to slash their budget. We're just not going to do it. We're just going to do the bare minimum. And what we advocate for is just not slashing, but taking a really thoughtful, scalpel approach to it. We know that you're going to have to, reduce costs, right? Of course you will. But again, focus back on experiences. How can you use your budgets, your reduced budgets, to stay relevant, to stay in front of people, to provide service? And we love this word lagniappe. Have you all been to New Orleans? Whoever's been to New Orleans has seen this word lagniappe. It's a little something extra. So, you go to dinner and you get a little tiny dessert. It's lagniappe, a little something extra. So whatever extra you can provide at this time that's memorable as you go into, again, difficult times, to stand out and to show that you care and to cement your relationship with your customers and your clients. Anything, Nicole, before we move on?
Nope. Just take a scalpel. Don't take a sledgehammer to your budget.
And so very importantly, to remember, because we're all thinking, oh, no money. Oh, my God, how do we keep our money? It's not just about price, obviously, our buying decisions. Time, quality, convenience, purpose, values, these are all not going away as part of the purchase decision. In fact, many of them take a higher level, or at a higher level for us. So to do that, the idea is to really, we've said it a number of times, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but really focusing on your value proposition and why you matter to people. Not how you market to people, but why you matter to people, right? And communicating all the time. What we've found consistently, and this is in good times and bads, it's the vacuum that causes the biggest problems for organizations as they move forward and grow. If people don't know what's happening, particularly in a crisis, obviously, their imaginations fill in the blanks. So as we go into new waters, as you're analyzing what your clients are facing and you're learning what they're facing, make sure that you keep them informed about yourself, about what you're doing, about how you're going to address them going forward, and your assessment of where things are. Adapting to new behaviors, just as good stuff did, or we did as well. Taking the lead. A lot of the times there is a vacuum, a leadership vacuum. People are kind of want to coalesce around somebody. So if you're the head of your organization, let it be you, and model the behaviors, communicate well, those kinds of things. And don't stop generating demand. We've already touched on that. Consider new markets. A lot of times new markets come about, like Peggy, there was probably a certain kind of person who was cooking all the time, and then a new kind of person who was starting to cook. My daughter, who's a millennial, oh my God, she cooks all the time. I never saw this behavior, and I'm a huge beneficiary of it, but we're looking forward. Right, we're looking forward to a new market, and how do you engage them? They have a different language, they have different interests, they use different ingredients.
Hi, Carlos. I had a question real quick here.
We're okay.
Oops. No, I think that was somebody's.
Courtney, let me just finish this list here real quickly. We talked about emotional intelligence and preparing for the upturn. In other words, not assuming that this is how it is, but knowing that you are creating customers for life, and how do you continue to serve them as they evolve through it. Okay, now somebody, Courtney, was it you who was speaking? Do you want to say something?
I think that may have just been her audio came on and she was doing something else.
Okay, couldn't tell.
Yeah.
We're about to get to Q&A. I'll tell you what, let's see. So tough times call for bold actions, right? And this is the time for you to think about, you know, how you think your market's going to change, how you think the world's going to change, how you're going to adapt to it, the new experiences and values you're going to put forward. So what are your key takeaways from the things that we've said here? Does anyone want to share anything?
Nancy, did you want to share what you put in chat? Anything around that?
Yeah, no, this is excellent. And what I think that sometimes we get so engrossed into all of that we're supposed to be doing that we kind of lose focus on, you know, what the end game is for somebody else, and we end up being so focused on the end game for us. So having that balance is not easy to do, and especially when we're chasing revenue all the time and thinking, damn it, you know, that idiot just didn't buy from me. What a jerk. And we take it personally. So I'm listening to some things that Daniel Pink is saying on Masterclass, which has been excellent on sort of reframing things and being a little bit more cognizant of the balance of the two.
Beautiful. That's a great takeaway.
You know, I just want to say that I often get inspiration when I'm at my, you know, nadir. Like I once had a newsletter for women business travelers, and I got a bunch of people who subscribed, but when they came to renewal, nobody was renewing, and I was in the depths of despair. So I thought, what am I going to do? And finally I thought, you know what? I'm just picking up the phone and calling these people. So I started calling them. And lo and behold, they said, well, things like, well, you covered one city, but I'm not going to that city for a long time, so I need you to cover more cities. Suddenly I had a plan. And it was all based on everything that they said, and it made so much sense. And it made the newsletter, not only did it inspired me, let's start there, all my energy came back, and I was able to rejigger my product. So whenever you find yourself at a moment where you go, geez, I don't know how to go forward, talk to your customers, talk to your clients.
Yeah.
Dan, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, well, I just love this. And what I love about it is this idea of emotional intelligence. So I'd love to share with you guys kind of what's going on for me. When I'm 72, so I lived through the 78 to 82 recession. And so this is really such a cool opportunity. And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, the underlying emotion for most people is fear. And so if I can help you as a business to reimagine your genius, to reimagine your why, your gift, what you're here to bring in the world, can we co-regulate down the fear and emotionally get to a point of what is it we're here to do, why it's so valuable, why people need us. So one of the analogies is that the largest sport in the United States is NASCAR. And I always ask business people, why do you think people go? And 80% of the time they'll say, well, they want to see who the winner is. And the truth is they go to see who's going to crash. And here's the difference in NASCAR. The early drivers, the young drivers, will take their foot off the pedal just a little to turn their head to see the crash. The experienced drivers actually accelerate. And so in this recession,
That's a good one.
Yeah. So in this recession, recessions are scary, but they're also a moment in time, just as emotions are a moment in time. We come into fear, joy, sadness, and then they leave us. So how is it as a business that if I can reimagine a future and I invest wisely now while everybody else is cutting marketing, they're, stuck in fear-based, which means they're not making great executive function decisions. If I put those seeds in my garden now, So for example, if I'm investing in digital technology now, they can't make that up. I'm going to be 2 years ahead because that's about how long the recession will last. And so I think if to any extent that we can take our customers on their hero's journey to get the call, I want to refuse the call, now I'm going to go, we get to be Gandalf, we get to be the guide, we get to handhold, so we actually can see them thrive, and that will build enormous customer loyalty. So I'm just blown away that you've actually grounded this in I've never seen a presentation grounded in emotional intelligence. I just think it's the coolest thing on earth.
Thank you. All of my discoveries have been mind-blowing in this area too.
Yeah.
And that's what we think it's the key. I mean, we've always said start with people, but how? It's with emotional intelligence, right? And by employing those techniques and learning about it.
Yeah. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a default of mine because I am a self-proclaimed fairly sensitive person, right? And I've thankfully been encouraged enough or took it upon myself to listen, to that intuition and, take the emotional cues. But we all gotta turn off. I mean, to Nancy's point earlier, and many of you have said, Heather brought this up too. It's like, what if we listened more often and checked in more often that way? And how does that completely change the trajectory of what we're doing? Janine gave all kinds of beautiful examples of that.
If you think about it, one of the greatest joys we have as humans is being recognized and understood and heard, right? So if you just apply that to your customers, you're going to be really successful. That very simple process, right? And they will be loyal. Yeah.
Did somebody else have something they wanted to share?
I have a question for you, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about all of this, which is great, and I love it. But when does too much become too much? So I'm thinking, so we're talking about emotional intelligence and part of the sales process, but when do you focus on that so much that you're constantly sort of giving and listening in and doing everything else and not getting back what you need?
Well, if you're not getting back what you need, that's probably you need to look at what you're doing, right? If there's no value, if you're not getting value in your customer interactions and your attempts to understand customers and clients and people, you have to look at your methods, because people are generally really open and want to share with you. And the ones who don't, they're going to self-select out, right? And then what you do with what they tell you, again, is up to you. How do you interpret what they're saying? How do you apply what they're saying?
So no, yeah, but let me sort of back up a little bit. You give and you give and you give, and sometimes I think we forget to make that ask, or they just say, I'm not going to become the client because I'm getting so much out of this. Why should I pay for it? Type of thing.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
We have to ask.
And then cut them off, otherwise, at
deserve.
some point, which is, yeah. All right.
Absolutely. I encourage you. This is not about just stepping forward only to serve and dance around. We should be paid and ask for what, for our value. Okay. And our worth. Yeah. And I think that is a lot of times women will dance around that. And
it's a mistake that we make. Yeah.
It is. And I just want to disrupt that and say, no, ask for what you're worth. Your time and your talents are worth so much. So ask for it. You will be rewarded. And if people have feedback on, maybe pricing or what have you, or If you need a sounding board, let us know. But
Mhm.
ask for what you're worth. Go out there and get it. Sell.
Build your
Absolutely.
service and your value, that your complementary part, into part of your funnel, right? It's part of your funnel. You provide something for free. Maybe you do a free consult, and then that's it, right? Then you're ready to convert. You've given, and now time to convert. So think of it programmatically. That way you'll get to the point where you go, now this is in my program, I stop now.